He left her when she was 6 months pregnant, said she was boring, said she was simple, said she had let herself go. He took everything and left her with nothing but a swollen belly and a broken heart. 5 years later, he saw her face on a magazine cover. She had built an empire worth more than Liz's entire family had ever owned. And when he came crawling back, begging for another chance, she looked at him with calm eyes and said 5 words that broke him completely. "Thank you for leaving me." This is the story of Chidima, the simple woman who was never simple at all, the hidden genius her husband was too blind to see, the blessing he threw away and spent the rest of his life regretting. Sit down. This one will change how you see rejection forever. In a small town where the river met the forest and the morning mist hung low over red earth roads, there lived a young woman named Chidima, whose name meant "God has written my destiny," but whose life seemed to suggest that God had forgotten to finish writing. Chidima was not the kind of woman who turned heads in the marketplace. She was not ugly, no, but she was what the village mothers called simple. Simple face, simple clothes, simple dreams. She worked as an assistant at her aunt's fabric shop, measuring cloth and calculating prices while other girls her age were planning weddings and naming their unborn children. By 27, Chidima had watched 16 of her classmates get married. She had sewn bridesmaids' dresses so many times her fingers knew the patterns by heart. She had cut 3 wedding bouquets but never cut a husband. Her mother had stopped asking when she would bring a man home. Now, she just sighed heavily whenever Chidima entered the room, as if her daughter's presence itself was a disappointment. But Chidima had a secret. Every night, after the shop closed and her aunt had gone to bed, Chidima would sit by her window and design. Not just fabric patterns, but entire collections. Dresses that existed only in her imagination. Wedding gowns that could make a bride look like a queen. Evening wear that belonged on magazine covers in faraway cities she had only seen in pictures. She filled notebook after notebook with her designs. She taught herself techniques from old magazines she found in the market. She practiced stitching until her work was so fine that even the most expensive tailors in town could not match it. But whenever anyone asked what she did, she would say simply that she worked in her aunt's shop. The notebooks stayed hidden under her bed. The dreams stayed locked in her heart. Because Chidima had learned early that dreams were dangerous for women like her. Simple women, unmarried women, women who had no business wanting more than what life had already decided to give them. Then Obina came. Obina was the son of Chief Maduka, the wealthiest man in 4 villages. He had returned from the city where he had been studying business and learning to spend his father's money in expensive ways. He was tall and handsome, with the kind of smile that made young girls giggle and old women remember their youth. Every unmarried woman in town suddenly found reasons to walk past the Maduka compound. Every mother with a daughter of marriageable age began cooking her finest dishes and sending them as gifts to Chief Maduka's wife. Chidima did none of these things. She continued measuring fabric and calculating prices and hiding her notebooks and dreaming her impossible dreams, which is perhaps why Obina noticed her. He came into the shop one afternoon looking for fabric for curtains in his new house, the house his father had built for him, the house that every young woman in town was hoping to enter as a wife. Chidima attended to him professionally, showing him different options, explaining quality and durability, treating him like any other customer despite her heart beating so fast she was sure he could hear it. He bought nothing that day, but he came back the next day and the next and the next. On the 5th day, he stopped pretending to look at fabric. "I have been watching you," he said, leaning against the counter with that smile that melted stronger women than Chidima. "I noticed," she replied without looking up from her calculations. "You are different from the other girls." "Different how?" "You do not chase me, you do not giggle when I speak, you do not try to impress me with flattery and false sweetness. Why?" Chidima finally looked up and met his eyes directly.
"Because I have work to do. Because my aunt trusts me to run this shop properly. And because you are a customer, not a husband I am trying to catch." Obina laughed, a real laugh that surprised even him. What if I want to be caught? Then you should find someone with a net. I am too busy for hunting. She went back to her calculations. Obina was not used to rejection. He was not used to women who did not fall at his feet simply because his father was rich. He was not used to being treated like an ordinary person. He became obsessed. The courtship lasted 8 months. 8 months of Obina pursuing Chidima with a determination that surprised everyone, including himself. 8 months of gifts she politely refused. 8 months of visits she kept professional. 8 months of his ego being bruised and rebuilt and bruised again. Chidima was not playing hard to get. She was genuinely uncertain. Something about Obina felt wrong to her. Not wrong in an obvious way. Wrong in a way she could not name. Like a dress that looked perfect on the hanger but did not quite fit when you tried it on. Like fabric that seemed expensive but had something cheap hidden in its weave. But her mother's sighs had grown heavier. Her aunt had started making comments about how the shop would need to be passed to someone eventually, and it would be nice if that someone had a husband to help. The whispers in the marketplace had shifted from poor Chidima to who does she think she is, rejecting Chief Maduka's son. So when Obina proposed with a ring that cost more than her aunt's entire shop, Chidima said yes. She told herself the wrongness was just fear. She told herself she was lucky. She told herself that love would grow. She told herself many lies that year. The wedding was the biggest the town had ever seen. Chief Maduka spared no expense. Chidima wore a dress she had secretly designed herself, though no one knew it. Everyone assumed it came from some fancy designer in the city. As she walked down the aisle toward Obina, who was smiling his perfect smile, Chidima felt the wrongness again, stronger this time, like a voice screaming inside her. She ignored it. She said, "I do." She became Mrs. Chidima Maduka, and she entered the beautiful house that would become her prison. The first month was sweet. Obina was attentive and charming. He bought her gifts. He took her to nice places. He showed her off to his friends like a new possession he was proud to own. The second month, the charm began to flicker. He started coming home late. He stopped explaining where he had been. He began looking at her with something that was not quite love, something that was closer to evaluation, like a businessman checking if his investment was performing well. The third month, Chidima discovered she was pregnant. She expected joy. She expected celebration. She expected Obina to lift her in his arms and spin her around the way husbands did in the movies she secretly watched. Instead, he nodded slowly and said, "Good, good. My father will be pleased." Then he left for a meeting that lasted until midnight. Chidima sat alone in her beautiful house with her hand on her belly and the wrongness screaming so loud now that she could no longer pretend it was fear.
By the 4th month, Obina had stopped pretending. He no longer came home most nights. When he did come home, he smelled like perfume that was not hers. He answered phone calls in other rooms and spoke in low voices. He looked at her growing belly with something that might have been resentment. Chidima tried to talk to him. She tried to understand what had changed. She tried to be a better wife, though she did not know what she was doing wrong. One night, she finally gathered the courage to ask directly, "Obina, are you seeing someone else?" He did not deny it. He did not apologize. He simply looked at her with cold eyes and said, "What did you expect? You are pregnant. You are tired all the time. You have let yourself go. A man has needs." The words hit her like physical blows. Let herself go? She was growing a human being inside her body. She was tired because creating life was exhausting. She had not let herself go. She was going through something miraculous.
But Obina did not see miracles. He saw inconvenience. He saw a wife who no longer served his needs. He saw a problem. The other woman's name was Adana. Chidima learned this not from Obina, but from the whispers that followed her in the marketplace. Poor thing, they said, barely bothering to lower their voices. Her husband has been seen everywhere with that Adana girl, the one with the long legs and the fast mouth. Shame. And she's pregnant too. Shame, shame, shame. Chidima stopped going to the marketplace. She stopped going anywhere. She sat in her beautiful prison and grew her beautiful baby and waited for her husband to remember that she existed. He remembered on a Tuesday evening when she was 6 months pregnant. He came home early for the first time in weeks. He sat her down in the living room like a boss about to fire an employee. He folded his hands and spoke in a voice that was calm and businesslike. Chidima, I want a divorce. She stared at him. I have thought about this carefully, he continued, as if discussing a business merger. You are a good woman, you will make a good mother, but I have realized that we are not compatible. I have found someone who understands me better, someone who matches my energy, someone who does not drain me the way you do. Drain him? She had given him everything. She had abandoned her dreams, her work, her sense of self. She had shrunk herself to fit into his world, and he felt drained? What about the baby? I will provide financially, of course. I am not a monster. But I think it is best if the child stays with you. Adana she's not ready for children. She has her own career, her own ambitions. She is not the motherly type. Not the motherly type. But she was the type worth leaving a pregnant wife for. Chidima felt something shift inside her. Something that had been bending finally broke. But it was not her spirit that broke. It was the cage she had built around herself, the lies she had been telling herself, the smallness she had been accepting. She looked at Obina clearly for the first time since their wedding day. She saw not a prince who had rescued her, but a coward who had used her. Not a blessing, but a lesson. Not a husband, but a mistake she had been too afraid to admit. Okay, she said. Obina blinked. He had clearly prepared for tears, for begging, for drama, not for this.
Okay, you want a divorce. You can have a divorce. Just like that. What would you like me to do, Obina? Beg? Cry? Get on my knees and plead for you to stay? Will that change anything? No, I suppose not. Then okay. File your papers. I will sign them. But I want nothing from you. Not your money, not your father's money, not this house, nothing. Now Obina looked genuinely confused. You cannot be serious. How will you survive? How will you raise a child alone? Your aunt's shop? Measuring fabric? That is not a life, Chidima. Be reasonable. Take the money. I do not want your money. Pride is expensive. You cannot afford it. Chidima stood up slowly, her hand on her belly, her eyes on the man she had almost lost herself trying to keep. You do not know what I can afford, she said quietly. You never asked, you never cared. You looked at me and saw a simple girl from a fabric shop. You never once asked what I dreamt about, what I wanted, what I was capable of. You saw someone you could own and you bought her. But I am not for sale anymore, Obina. I am taking myself off the market. She walked to their bedroom and began to pack. She did not pack the expensive clothes he had bought her. She did not pack the jewelry. She did not pack any of the things that belonged to Mrs. Chidima Maduka. She packed only what belonged to Chidima. Her notebooks, her designs, her secret dreams that had been buried for so long they had almost suffocated. That night, she returned to her aunt's house with one bag and a baby in her belly and nothing else. Her mother cried. Not tears of sympathy, but tears of shame. What will people say? How could you let this happen? You were married to Chief Maduka's son. You had everything, and you just walked away? I walked away because I finally remembered how to walk, Chidima replied. I had been crawling for so long I forgot I had legs. Her aunt said nothing. She simply made up the small room in the back of the shop and placed a cup of tea beside Chidima's bed. That night, for the first time in months, Chidima slept peacefully. The next 3 months were hard. Her belly grew heavier. Her body ached. The whispers in the marketplace grew louder. Everyone knew the story now. Chief Maduka's son had left his pregnant wife for Adana. Poor, simple Chidima had been thrown away like spoiled food. Shame, shame, shame. But Chidima was not listening to the whispers anymore. She was too busy working. Every night after the shop closed, she sat with her notebooks and refined her designs. She studied the latest fashion magazines her aunt brought from the city. She experimented with fabrics and techniques and colors. And she began to create. Not just designs on paper, but actual pieces. Dresses that started as scraps and became something beautiful. Outfits that looked like they belonged in boutiques far fancier than anything their small town had ever seen. Her aunt watched silently. Then one day she asked, "Can you make something for Mrs. Okonkwo? She wants a dress for her daughter's engagement party. The tailor she usually uses is too busy." Chidima made the dress. Mrs. Okonkwo cried when she saw it, not because it was bad, but because it was the most beautiful thing she had ever worn. She asked who designed it, and Chidima admitted quietly that she had. Word spread, slowly at first, then faster. By the time Chidima went into labor, she had a waiting list of 12 clients. Not because she had advertised, not because she had begged for attention, simply because quality speaks for itself, and Chidima's quality was screaming. Her daughter was born on a rainy Tuesday morning, small and perfect, with her mother's eyes and her father's nothing. Chidima looked at this tiny person she had created and felt something she had never felt before. Complete. Not because a man had completed her, not because society approved of her, not because she had achieved some external marker of success. Complete because she was finally living as herself. No masks, no shrinking, no hiding her notebooks under the bed. She named her daughter Kamsiyo Chukwu. As I asked God, so he gave me. Because Chidima had asked for the wrong things for so long. She had asked for a husband. She had asked to be chosen. She had asked to be seen as worthy by people whose opinions did not matter. Now she had stopped asking for those things and started asking for courage, for strength, for the ability to become who she was always meant to be. And God had answered. Meanwhile, Obina's life was unraveling in ways he did not understand. At first, everything seemed perfect. Adana was exciting and beautiful and nothing like boring pregnant Chidima. She laughed at his jokes. She accompanied him to parties. She looked good on his arm. But within weeks of his divorce being finalized, strange things began to happen. His father's biggest business deal fell through. A contract they had been negotiating for 2 years simply collapsed overnight. The client gave no explanation, just no longer interested. Then another deal fell through. Then another. Chief Maduka began to worry. He consulted business advisors. He checked for enemies. He found nothing. It was as if luck itself had simply packed its bags and left. Obina's personal ventures fared even worse. Every investment he made failed. Every opportunity he pursued dissolved into nothing. His friends began to distance themselves because failure is contagious and nobody wanted to catch it. Adana, who had been attracted to his wealth and status, grew restless. She had not signed up for a struggling man. She had signed up for the son of Chief Maduka, not whoever this unlucky version was. 1 year after leaving Chidima, Obina found himself alone in a bar, wondering what had gone wrong. He had done everything right. He had married the simple girl to please his family. He had left her when she became boring to pursue his happiness. He had made the practical choice at every turn. So why was everything falling apart? His mother, a quiet woman who rarely interfered, finally spoke up.
"You made a mistake with that girl," she said one evening when Obina came home defeated from another field meeting. "Chidima, what does she have to do with anything? There are things you do not understand, my son. Things about blessings and curses. Things about destiny and choice. That girl was not ordinary. She was the most ordinary woman I have ever met, Mama. Simple, quiet, nothing special." His mother shook her head sadly. "You looked at her with blind eyes. You saw what was on the surface. You never looked deeper. That girl carried something special, a grace, a blessing. I saw it the first time you brought her home. I told your father, this one is different. This one will bring fortune. You never told me this. Would you have listened?" Obina had no answer. "Go and find her," his mother urged. "Apologize. Beg if you have to. Maybe it is not too late to repair what you broke."
Obina laughed bitterly. "She has nothing, Mama." She went back to measuring fabric in her aunt's shop. "She has a child she is raising alone. What could she possibly have that I need?" His mother looked at him with pity. "That is exactly what I mean," she said. "You still cannot see." Obina did not go to find Chidima that day, or the next day, or the next month. But life continued to crumble. Adana left him for a wealthy businessman from the city. She did not even say goodbye properly. Just a text message saying, "This is not working. Good luck with everything." His father's health began to fail along with his businesses. The great Chief Maduka, who had once employed half the town, was now selling off properties just to stay afloat. Friends who used to beg for Obina's attention now crossed the street to avoid him. 2 years after leaving his pregnant wife, Obina was a shell of the man he had once been. Then he heard the news. Someone named CD Designs was taking over the fashion industry. A mysterious designer whose pieces were being worn by celebrities and politicians and wealthy women across the country. Nobody knew much about her except that she had started from nothing and was now worth more than Chief Maduka had ever been at his peak. Obina paid no attention to fashion news. Why would he? He had more important problems. But then he saw the magazine cover. It was in a waiting room at a bank where he was begging for a loan he would not receive. The magazine was months old and dog-eared, but the cover was unmistakable. CD Designs, the simple woman who built an empire. And there she was, Chidima. Not the simple girl from the fabric shop, not the boring pregnant wife he had thrown away, but a queen, confident, radiant, draped in fabrics that looked like they cost more than his father's remaining house. The article told her story, how she had been abandoned while pregnant, how she had returned to nothing, how she had built a fashion empire from a small room behind her aunt's shop, how her designs were now worn by the most powerful women in the country. It told of her philosophy, how she believed that every woman carried hidden beauty that the world tried to suppress, how her designs were created to reveal, not conceal, how her brand was built on the idea that simplicity was not weakness, but strength waiting to be discovered. The article quoted her directly. "I spent years hiding who I was because I thought I was not enough. I married a man who confirmed my worst fears about myself. When he left, I had 2 choices. I could believe the story he told about me being worthless and simple and forgettable, or I could write my own story. I chose to write my own story." Obina read the article 3 times. Then he read it again. Then he understood what his mother had been trying to tell him. The blessing had never been magical. It had never been supernatural. It had simply been Chidima herself, her talent, her vision, her quiet brilliance that he had been too blind and arrogant to see. He had been married to a genius and had called her simple. He had held gold in his hands and thrown it away, chasing bronze. The realization broke something inside him, not in a way that made him better, in a way that made him desperate. He needed to find her. He needed to apologize. He did not even know what he needed. He just knew that everything had gone wrong when he left her, and maybe everything could go right if he got her back. He found her office address in the article, a beautiful building in the city that bore her logo. CD Designs, Chidima's dreams.
She had named her empire after the notebooks she used to hide under her bed. He drove there the next day. He did not call ahead. He did not think about what he would say. He just showed up at the reception desk and asked to see her. The receptionist looked at him with polite confusion. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but please tell her that her ex-husband is here. Obina Maduka. She will see me." The receptionist made a call, spoke quietly, listened, hung up. "Please wait." He waited for an hour, then 2. He watched people come and go, important people, wealthy people, people who treated this building like a temple, and Chidima like its goddess. Finally, the receptionist said, "She will see you now." Obina's heart was pounding as he walked toward her office. He had prepared speeches in his head, apologies, explanations, promises to change. But when he walked through the door and saw her, all his words evaporated. She was more beautiful than he remembered, not because her face had changed, but because she was finally wearing it properly. No more shrinking, no more hiding, no more pretending to be less than she was. And beside her, playing quietly with fabric scraps on the floor, was a little girl who looked exactly like Chidima had looked in their wedding photos. Innocent, full of potential, unaware of the failure standing in her mother's doorway. Obina swallowed hard. "Chidima, She held up her hand, not rudely, just firmly. "Before you speak, I want you to meet someone. This is Kamsi, your daughter. She is 3 years old. She is brilliant and kind and everything good in this world. You have never met her because you chose not to. I am introducing you now because she deserves to see her father's face at least once, so she knows, so she can decide for herself when she is older what to do with that knowledge." Obina looked at the little girl, his daughter, the child he had dismissed before she was even born, the child he had paid money to avoid rather than time to know. Kamsi looked up at him with curious eyes. "Mama, who is that man?" "That is your father," Chidima said gently. "He came to visit." "Oh." Kamsi considered this information. Then she went back to her fabric scraps. She had clearly not been waiting for this moment. She had not been missing anything. Because Chidima had made sure she never felt incomplete.
Obina felt tears building in his eyes. He had not cried in years. He had forgotten how. "Chidima," he started, "I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. I was blind and arrogant and foolish. I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too stupid to see her value. Chidima listened patiently. No anger on her face, no satisfaction either, just calm attention. "I want you back," he continued desperately. "I know I do not deserve it. I know I have no right to ask, but I have lost everything, Chidima. My money, my status, my family business, everything has fallen apart since you left. I finally understand what you were, what you are. Please, give me another chance. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Chidima was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. "Obina, do you remember what you said to me the night you asked for a divorce?" He remembered. Every word had been playing on repeat in his mind for months. "You said I was draining you. You said I had let myself go. You said you needed someone who matched your energy." He winced. "I was wrong. Yes, you were. But that is not my point. My point is this. You saw me at my most vulnerable, pregnant, dependent, afraid. And you decided I was worthless. You measured my value by how I made you feel in that moment. You never once considered what I might become, who I might be, what I was capable of. I see it now." "Now?" Chidima smiled sadly. "Now you see it. Now that I have built an empire, now that I am wealthy and successful and powerful. Now you can see my value because it is written in numbers and achievements and magazine covers. But Obina, I was this person when you left. The talent was there. The vision was there. The potential was there. You just could not see it because you were not looking for it. You were looking for someone to serve you, someone to make you feel important, someone to shrink so you could feel big. That is not love. That is not partnership. That is consumption. And I am done being consumed. Obina, please. I forgive you. She said it simply, without drama. I forgive you for leaving. I forgive you for choosing Adana. I forgive you for making me feel worthless in my most sacred moment. I forgive all of it. Then give me another chance. No. The word hung in the air. Forgiveness and restoration are not the same thing, Obina. I can forgive you without inviting you back into my life. I can release the anger without picking up the relationship. I can wish you well without being your wife. So this is it? You are just going to let me go? I let you go the night you walked out. I have been free ever since. The question is not whether I will let you go. The question is whether you will let yourself go. Let go of the idea that you can fix this with words. Let go of the fantasy that we can return to something that was broken from the beginning. Let go of the need to possess me again. Obina was crying now. Real tears, ugly tears. The tears of a man watching his last hope dissolve. What am I supposed to do? Everything is falling apart. My life is ruined. Without you, stop. Chidima's voice was firm but not unkind. Listen to yourself. You came here hoping I would save you, hoping that getting me back would restore your luck and your wealth and your happiness. You are still looking for someone to carry you, Obina. That is the pattern. That is the problem. Your life is not falling apart because you left me. Your life is falling apart because you have never learned to build anything yourself. You rode on your father's success. You rode on my hidden gifts while we were married. You rode on Adana's attention when I was gone. You have been riding your whole life, and now there is no one left to carry you. So what do I do? Learn to walk. Chidima stood and walked to where Kamsi was still playing happily. Your daughter does not know you. That is your fault, but it is also your opportunity. You cannot be my husband again, but you can learn to be her father. Not by buying her things or showing up with gifts, by being present, by being consistent, by becoming someone worth knowing. That is what I am offering you. Not a reconciliation, not a romance, a chance to know your daughter, a chance to be better than you have been, but only if you can do it without expectations, without hoping it will lead somewhere, without trying to use her to get back to me. Can you do that? Obina looked at his daughter, his beautiful daughter, who had lived 3 years without knowing his face. He thought about what Chidima was offering, not what he wanted, not what he had come for. Something smaller, but somehow more valuable. A chance to stop taking and start giving. A chance to walk on his own feet. A chance to become someone worth knowing. Yes, he whispered, I can do that. Chidima nodded. Then come back next Saturday. We will start slowly. And Obina? Yes, if you hurt her, if you disappear again, if you make promises you cannot keep, there will be no more chances. She is not a path back to me. She is her own person. Treat her like one. I will. He left the office that day with nothing he had come for and everything he actually needed. A purpose that was not about possession, a relationship that was not about extraction, a chance to become rather than to acquire. Outside the building, he paused and looked back at the logo on the door. CD Designs, Chidima's dreams. She had built an empire from the ashes of his rejection. She had turned her pain into power. She had become everything he had been too blind to see when she was right in front of him. And now, finally, he understood. The blessing had never been something he could own. It was never a resource to be extracted or a treasure to be possessed. It was simply Chidima being fully herself. Chidima creating and dreaming and building. Chidima refusing to be smaller than she was meant to be. When he left her, he had not lost a blessing. He had lost the privilege of witnessing one. But maybe, if he worked very hard and expected very little, he could still catch glimpses of it in his daughter's eyes. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe that would teach him what he should have learned years ago. That you cannot take blessings, you can only stand beside them with gratitude and hope they let you stay.
5 years later, people in the town still talked about Chidima, but the story had changed. They no longer spoke of the simple girl abandoned by Chief Maduka's son. They spoke of the genius who had been hidden in plain sight. They spoke of the empire that had risen from nothing. They spoke of the woman who had proven that rejection was just redirection. Mothers told their daughters her story differently now. They said, do not wait for a man to see your value. See it yourself. They said, do not hide your gifts to make others comfortable. Shine. They said, the people who leave you might be doing you a favor you do not understand yet. Chidima heard these stories and smiled. Not because she enjoyed being an example, but because somewhere out there was another simple girl hiding notebooks under her bed. Another invisible woman shrinking herself to fit into spaces that were too small for her. Another dreamer being told that her dreams were too big for someone like her. And maybe that girl would hear Chidima's story and think, if she could do it, maybe I can too. That would be enough. That would be more than enough. As for Obina, he kept his promise. He showed up every Saturday without fail. He learned to play with Kamsi without expectations. He learned to ask about her life without trying to control it. He learned to be present without being possessive. He never got Chidima back. She met someone else eventually, a quiet man who had seen her genius from the first moment and had never once asked her to be less. They married in a small ceremony that Obina was not invited to, but heard about through Kamsi. It hurt, of course it hurt, but the hurt was different now. It was not the entitled pain of losing something he owned. It was the honest grief of missing something beautiful he had thrown away. And in that grief was something new, something that felt almost like growth. Obina was finally learning what his mother had tried to teach him years ago, that blessings are not possessions, that people are not prizes, that the measure of a man is not what he acquires, but how he treats what he is given. He had been given a queen and had treated her like a servant. That mistake would live with him forever. But so would the lessons. And perhaps, in the end, that was the real blessing Chidima had given him. Not her presence, but her absence. Not her love, but her departure. Not the comfort of being carried, but the painful necessity of learning to walk alone. Some blessings look like losses. Some endings are really beginnings. And some women who seem simple are anything but. If you understand this, you are wiser than Obina was. If you do not understand yet, perhaps life will teach you the way it taught him. Either way, remember Chidima's story, not as a warning, but as a promise.
That your rejection might be your redirection. That your pain might be your preparation. That the person who threw you away might have been setting you free. And that somewhere inside you, hidden under beds and buried beneath fear, are notebooks full of dreams that the world is waiting to see. Stop hiding them. Start building. Become who you were always meant to be, and let those who could not see your value live with the consequences of their blindness. That is not revenge. That is simply destiny. And destiny, unlike husbands, cannot be stolen. It can only be revealed. Because the truth is, the world does not decide who you are. It only reveals who you have the courage to become. Chidima was never saved by luck. She was saved by the moment she stopped abandoning herself. And maybe, somewhere in your life right now, there is something that feels like a loss, a door that closed, a person who walked away, a future that did not unfold the way you hoped. But maybe it is not the end of your story. Maybe it is the beginning of your becoming. So do not measure your life by who stayed. Measure it by who you became after they left. Because sometimes rejection is not rejection. Sometimes it is redirection. And one day you will look back at the moment that broke you and realize it was the moment that revealed you. If this story spoke to your heart, take a moment to like this video. It helps this message reach someone else who needs it. And in the comments, tell me this. Have you ever experienced a rejection that later became your greatest blessing? I read every comment, and your story might be the one someone else needs to hear. And if you believe in stories that remind you of your worth, subscribe to Echoes of Wisdom by Crystal and join a community that refuses to forget who they are. Because your story is not over. This is only the part where you begin.